Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is a morning update. Well, Ghislaine Maxwell and her legal team have tried just about every trick in the book at this point to get their client out of jail. None of it has worked. Well, now they have a list of 12 reasons why Ghislaine Maxwell should have some charges dropped, why the case should be stopped, why it should be dismissed, how it's not fair to her because of the juror pool, a whole litany of BS nonsense. Now, remember, what did I tell you all was going to happen? She was going to try and use technicalities to get off on these charges because she can't use her innocence as the basis for her defense because guess what? Breaking news. She's not innocent. If she was innocent, they'd be going hard in the paint to try and prove that innocence. Not looking for technicalities, not looking for loopholes, and certainly not throwing a bunch of shit against the wall, such as these 12 arguments. It is ludicrous that this lady and her legal team are able to muck the court system up with all of these moronic and ridiculous reasons. But we knew it was coming. We knew that Ghislaine Maxwell wasn't just going to accept her fate meekly, and we knew that she was going to do whatever she possibly could to try and get off on these charges. So it really shouldn't come as a shock to anybody that she has many different wheels in motion, that she is exploring every single option that is available to her, and that her high-powered legal team isn't going to try and drag this out for as long as possible, A, because that's what they do, and B, because the meter is running. Wait, you think they're doing this because they're a charitable organization, her lawyers? Hell no. They're making a bunch of money off of Ghislaine Maxwell right now. And they're going to explore every technicality that you could possibly imagine. And that's what we see here with these 12 arguments being made by the bipedal serpent and her legal team. Nothing more, nothing less. Now, it boomerangs back to, is the judge going to continue to do the right thing and stand fast and laugh at Ghislaine Maxwell's legal team and their very, very, very apparent search for technicalities and loopholes? And again, I don't blame her lawyers for that for the most part. That's the system that's set up by our corrupt-ass justice system. So my real beef is with the lawmakers who have put this system in place. But at the same time, it's quite apparent that Ghislaine Maxwell's legal team doesn't think that there is a tenable position to defend when it comes to guilty or innocent. Their whole entire defense, it seems, is to search for that technicality and hope beyond hope that something like the non-prosecution agreement offers Ghislaine Maxwell some protection. Because short of that, I think they realize that there's going to be no hope for getting her off of these charges. So let's jump into our article from the Daily Mail and see just exactly what they have to say about the situation. Headline: From not enough black and Hispanic jurors to COVID, Ghislaine Maxwell makes 12 arguments as to why her case should be stopped, as she begs judge to dismiss child sex trafficking charges against her. I mean, really? Is this lady for real? Like, did she come out of a different alternate universe and think that her ridiculous pedantic arguments here are going to work? Because she's wrong? You want to get the cases dropped? Here's an idea. You should have never been involved with Epstein in the first place. You should have never, ever, ever abused these girls like they said you did. All right, why don't you try and defend that instead of trying to get off on technicalities? This article was authored by Sam Baker. Ghislaine Maxwell has asked a judge to dismiss her case ahead of her trial on charges she recruited teenage girls in the 90s for Jeffrey Epstein to sexually abuse. Among the arguments filed by lawyers on behalf of Maxwell, 59, was a claim that the indictment should be thrown out because it was obtained from a grand jury seated outside New York City, in White Plains, where the lawyers said black and Hispanic grand jurors would be underrepresented. Wow, really reaching down there, really reaching deep, huh? If Ghislaine Maxwell thinks that she's going to find allies in the black or Hispanic community, she is sorely mistaken. We're talking about two groups that are not what you would call friends to people like Ghislaine Maxwell. Chomos, child molesters. That is an unacceptable thing to be no matter what. And furthermore, to talk about, because it's in White Plains, it'll be underrepresented, that's a bunch of horse shit too. Where I'm from, South Yonkers, which is right below White Plains, it is a very diverse place, okay? Right on the border of the South Bronx. And there is a very diverse juror pool to be selected from. So right off the bat, we can just slap that one down with a cudgel right across the head. The fact that Ghislaine Maxwell, the epitome of white privilege, the epitome of having everything handed to you, would have the audacity to try and act like she is going to not get a fair shake because of the juror pool in White Plains. Newsflash, Ghislaine. You're going to get a bunch of your Westchester friends probably on that jury pool. You should be ecstatic about this. Again, it's just throwing more shit at the wall for these people. Ghislaine Maxwell's lawyers, they understand. They're not dumb people. They understand that they don't have a case here. They can't defend this lady. So let's latch on to anything that we can as we fall down from the top of this tree. We'll grab onto any branch, even if it has thorns. Anything to keep us from crashing into the forest floor. And this next one cracks me up. Right back to the COVID, huh? They said the coronavirus outbreak was used as an excuse to seat the grand jury outside of New York City when the pandemic was killing thousands of city residents. Well, an excuse? I thought it was this big problem, a big pandemic, and a bunch of people were dying from it. What do you mean an excuse? So people dying is not a good enough reason for Ghislaine Maxwell and her maniac legal team? Sorry, but guess what? That's what happens, all right? It's still in the state of New York, and for them to try and act like there's no diversity in Westchester County is laughable at best. I'm from Westchester County. Now, don't get me wrong. There are some very, very affluent areas of Westchester County. No doubt about it. Scarsdale, Irvington, plenty of places where there are people with money. But let's not act like Westchester is just some ritzy-yutsy place. Yonkers is a pretty rough and tumble spot, folks, okay? Certainly never going to be considered an upper-class suburb of New York City. I can promise you that much. So the coronavirus stuff is just ridiculous. I'm so tired of people trying to use the pandemic as a way to get their way, to make their argument, or to use it as a way to try and get out of jail, or it's just so ridiculous. Ghislaine Maxwell is just as safe in her lodgings in jail as she would be anywhere else when it comes to the pandemic. In a footnote they wrote, the fact that Miss Maxwell herself is neither black nor Hispanic does not deprive her of standing to raise this challenge. I agree with that, right? I would never say that somebody can't make a challenge to the court or to try and get a different jury pool. That's well within your rights, and go for it. But for them to try and paint it like Westchester is like this super affluent area, like it's Beverly Hills, is a joke, okay? An absolute joke. Not true, nowhere based in fact. And I can tell you right now that there are places in Yonkers that are so poor, it would make your head spin, folks. So I don't know what they're talking about, how the jury pool would be tainted up in Westchester. Give me a break. In fact, I think that no matter where you go in the vicinity of New York City, you're going to have a bunch of rich folk, a bunch of people with money. Because guess what? To live in New York City, you have to be rich. And in this article is the actual letter from Cohen and Gresser. And the letter reads, Dear Judge Nathan, on behalf of our client, Ghislaine Maxwell, we will be filing the following pretrial motions with accompanying exhibits. 1. Motion to dismiss the superseding indictment for breach of the non-prosecution agreement. 2. Motion to dismiss counts 1 through 4 and the superseding indictment as time-barred. 3. Motion under the Due Process Clause to suppress all evidence obtained from the government subpoena to, redacted, and to dismiss counts 5 and 6. 4. Motion to dismiss counts 5 and 6 of the superseding indictment because the alleged misstatements are not perjurious as a matter of law. 5. Motion for a severance of the separate trial on counts 5 and 6 of the superseding indictment. 6. Motion to strike from the superseding indictment. 7. Motion to dismiss counts 1 through 6 of the superseding indictment for pre-indictment delay. 8. Motion to dismiss either count 1 or count 3 of the superseding indictment as multiplicitous. 9. Motion to dismiss the superseding indictment as it was obtained in violation of the Sixth Amendment. 10. Motion for a bill of particulars and pretrial disclosures. 11. Motion under the Fourth Amendment, Martindale, and the Fifth Amendment to suppress all evidence obtained from the government subpoena to, redacted, and to dismiss counts 5 and 6. 12. Motion to dismiss counts 1 through 4 of the superseding indictment for lack of specificity. So that is the basis for their argument, right? Those are the 12 bullet points outlined by the defense. And if you notice, none of them say, well, our client is innocent. It is all technicalities and all loopholes. Folks, this is what I warned you was coming, didn't I? And again, I'm certainly no legal expert or, an Adam Klasfeld or anything like that. But the writing was on the wall for what they were going to do. And I've seen mafioso try and do this before. I've seen Dons try and use this same kind of defense. And it just doesn't work. It didn't work then, and I highly doubt it's going to work now. Lawyers also said the indictment against their client was obtained unjustly and does not allege crime specific enough to bring before a jury. Well, we'll see about that, won't we? Let's get it in front of the jury, and then let's see what the jury has to say, shall we? Because from where I'm sitting, there's a lot, okay? Not just enough to bring to a jury, but enough to get your client convicted and sent to the clink for the rest of her life. Among the 12 separate arguments attacking the indictment, one of the first claims is that a non-prosecution deal Epstein reached with the federal government a dozen years ago should shield Maxwell from prosecution too. And there it is, rearing its ugly head. And this falls squarely on the shoulders of the United States government and the Department of Justice. The Democrats now control all three branches. You wanted the power, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to continue to let these people get off? Or are you finally going to put your foot down as the government and fix this? There's no one else to blame now. There's no more boogeyman, none of that. It is up to the current administration to make this happen. It is up to the current administration to make sure that deals like this never happen again. And it certainly is up to the 11th Circuit Court to make this right. They are the ones who hold all the power right now. They can make this non-prosecution agreement go away and really open the floodgates. And if there's any justice left in this country, that's what's going to happen. If not, folks, if the 11th Circuit keeps this non-prosecution agreement in place, it's just another shot to the gut, just another example of how the system is absolutely corrupt and how it needs to be completely and utterly shattered and rebuilt. This is their last chance. If they can't do the right thing here and strike down this non-prosecution agreement, then I think it is certainly a sign that the decay can no longer be hidden. So I really hope the 11th does the right thing. They said the fact that a Manhattan grand jury convened as early as June 25th showed there was no reason for prosecution not to wait other than a publicity-driven desire to arrest Miss Maxwell on the anniversary of the Epstein indictment. No, they were probably trying to send a message, okay? The publicity-driven. Give me a break. If that was the case, don't you think that they would have been going after Maxwell for years? People have been screaming from the mountaintops about this case for years. Not many people, but a lot of people have. And that had no bearing on the case. Here's the deal. Your client got nailed, and now you're scrabbling and clawing for anything you can grab a hold of to try and deflect blame, to try and deflect attention. Oh, it's these technicalities. Maxwell, she should get off because of these technicalities. Oh, Maxwell didn't do any of this. You're blaming her for Epstein's sins. Meanwhile, there are scores and scores of girls who are pointing the finger directly at Ghislaine Maxwell. How about you guys try and refute some of that, huh? No wonder you don't want it to go to trial. Maxwell's lawyers also asked that she be tried separately on charges that she committed perjury when she testified in a civil case brought by one of Epstein's accusers. They said prosecutors were using those charges improperly as a way to introduce evidence from after the 1990s. Again, technicalities. Not that the allegations are incorrect or wrong or that didn't happen, but they're too old. You can't use those. Meanwhile, the prosecution is well prepared to deal with this, in my opinion. I think Allison Moe is very, very smart and very shrewd, and I think that she will have a proper game plan to answer each one of these ridiculous, nonsensical bullet points thrown into the mix by Ghislaine Maxwell and her lawyers. So they can try, right? They can try, but I don't think it's going to work. The agreement Epstein reached with the federal government that forms one of Maxwell's arguments sought to protect Epstein and those around him. But Maxwell herself was not identified by name in the document, so that could prove to be a rub for her as well if she tries to use this argument. Her name isn't mentioned in here, and now I know it says all unnamed co-conspirators as well, but I think that there is a pathway for a legal fight there. There is always a pathway for a legal fight in the United States, and I think the verbiage of that agreement can be attacked. So we will see. It all hinges on what the 11th Circuit decides to do. If the 11th Circuit upholds it, then have to move to the next level. But if they chop it down, then all of it's moot, and we really get to see things kicked into motion. The document had been signed by Epstein when he agreed to plead guilty to state charges in Florida that forced him to register as a sex offender afterwards. Not in New Mexico, though. Let's remember, he did not have to register as a sex offender in New Mexico. Lawyers for Epstein had planned to argue the deal with federal prosecutors in Florida in 2008 protected him against sex trafficking charges lodged against him in July 2019 in New York City. That wouldn't have worked either. That argument would have been shot to pieces. It was a whole different case with a bunch of different charges, same as Maxwell. Manhattan federal prosecutors maintained they could proceed against Epstein or those who worked for him regardless. Yeah, and that's the same precedent that's being used here. The non-prosecution agreement isn't an all-around get-out-of-jail-free card. It's just for the specific crimes that were committed during that period. So any other crimes that were committed after or before the crimes that were protected in the agreement are still fair game. Epstein killed himself at a Manhattan federal prison a month after his arrest, allegedly. Maxwell was arrested last July and has remained jailed on grounds she might flee. She has pleaded not guilty to charges that she recruited 3 teenage girls, including a 14-year-old, for Epstein to sexually abuse between 1994 to 1997. Federal prosecutors declined to comment and will file arguments in response in a few weeks ahead of a scheduled trial in July. In a recent bail application, Maxwell revealed she had set aside $7.67 million to be spent on lawyers out of $22.5 million in assets belonging to herself and her husband. Oh, a whole $7.67 million, huh? Just, a couple bucks set to the side, a little pocket change, some coins found in your cousin from Boston's couch. Isn't that nice? These people are living in an alternate reality, folks. Not the same place that you and I reside, that's for sure. In the event Maxwell's lawyers cannot force a dismissal of the charges against her, they also made requests that would reduce the number of charges she faces. Again, it is not about her guilt or innocence, folks, and that's exactly what this shows you. This just puts into writing what I've been saying now for months. It's not about guilt or innocence when it comes to people like Ghislaine Maxwell. It's about technicalities, loopholes, and having the most high-profile lawyers as possible to navigate those loopholes behind the scenes. And that's what's being attempted here. And that's what's always happened when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein and his cohorts. But guess what? It's not going to work this time. They're going to need a new strategy. And I don't think they have one. Because it certainly doesn't seem like they are attempting to argue guilt or innocence. What they're relying on is simple technicalities. And folks, I don't think it's going to work this time. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. All of the links that go with this episode can be found in the description box. To everybody who has donated to the podcast, thank you folks very much. And if you have sent me an email in the last week, I'm trying to get back to all of them, a little backed up once again. There are a lot of them. So please bear with me. And if I miss your email, pop into that live stream and I can answer your questions right there live directly. But I'm going to try and get to those emails the next few days and try and get them all answered by the weekend so that when the next onslaught comes, I can play catch up some more. Isn't that fun? All right, everybody, I will be back later on and we will pick up where we left off.